Well, hello. This week we're going to be talking about Jacques Cartier, an explorer who came to Canada in the 1500s. He did not discover Canada, though, because there were already people here. And we're going to talk about that, too. Okay, so this is really important to understand, is that Canada was not discovered by Europeans. Europeans came here, but there had been First Nations people living in Canada for thousands of years who had extremely complex societies and civilizations, and the whole narrative of exploration and discovery is an utter load of crap. So, now we can carry on. Jacques Cartier and his arrival to Canada. So France's first foray into the New World, or the Americas, was in 1524 when they sent an Italian navigator, and he kind of piddled up and down the coast for a bit, came back and said, yeah, you know what, I found some stuff, but I didn't find this great passage we were looking for. The passage that France wanted to find, along with other European nations, was a passage to China or India to tap into the lucrative markets there. So in 1534, they sent Jacques Cartier, a very experienced commander, to go and explore the New World. So, our French friend Jacques shows up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, of course it wasn't called that then, and he eventually landed at what is now Prince Edward Island. And here he met some Micmac traders who were trading things like furs for glass beads, tools, knives, etc. with the French. And then they kind of kept sailing along. So as Jacques Cartier and his crew sail along, they met some Iroquois who had come from the inland to fish. And evidently the Iroquois were not equipped to trade with the French, at least in the French's eyes, because they didn't have any furs. So Cartier, being a good French explorer, took Chief Donnacona's two sons and kidnapped them in order to take them back to France so that they could learn French and serve as guides on future expeditions. Needless to say, this probably caused some tension between the Iroquois and the French. So in 1535, Jacques Cartier returns with 3 ships and sails up the St. Lawrence River to the village of Stadacona. And just while we're here, they stop in a cove on August 10th, and because August 10th, the patron saint of August 10th was St. Lawrence, they name this place St. Lawrence, which of course then became the name for this entire hugely enormous waterway. Now, the French were still really disregarding the Stadaconan people's land rights and trading rights, and weren't exactly endearing themselves to the local native populations, what with kidnappings, etc. And this is an important thing to remember about exploration at the time, is that most European countries that went exploring, they were doing so under either a feeling of divine right, or that they were just entitled to whatever they found, and therefore the people who lived there really didn't have any rights, and so the French would just do whatever they wanted, as did the English and the Portuguese and the Spanish, etc. But Jacques Cartier, being the tough explorer that he was, decided, you know what, we're going to spend the winter here, we're going to make a go of it. Canadian winters happen. 25 of his crew, which was about a quarter of them, were killed that winter by scurvy before they discovered boiling a certain type of bark, which was high in vitamin C, could stave off the disease. So Cartier ends up going back to France, you know, with his tail between his legs a little bit, and leaves in the spring of 1536. Now, because France was an empire, it was fighting a lot of wars, so the French Wars of Religion, which lasted from 1562 to 1598, sort of kept France out of the whole exploration game, and Cartier wasn't able to return to Canada until 1541. At this time, they thought, okay, we're really gonna try, and they took 150 French settlers to establish a colony and set up New France. Things again didn't go well. There's not a lot of information that survives from that early colony, but it's reported that the First Nations groups in the area killed around 35 of the settlers, and when Cartier's successor came afterwards to reinforce the colony, Cartier had left, and the colony was just basically in tatters. And it wasn't for quite a long time after that basically the next 50 years, that the French basically left Canada alone, left it to the First Nations people, and just sort of threw their hands up with it and said, you know what, we're done with this, for now. So you're probably thinking by now, at least I hope you are, so why do we study Jacques Cartier then? Why is he such a big deal in Canada, and why do we always hear that name? Well, again, this goes with the whole narrative of history, where really, for the most part, Canadian history has been preoccupied with European explorers. And while it was a new discovery for Europe, again, there were people here, thousands and thousands and thousands of years of civilization before the Europeans came here. Jacques Cartier, of course, is important, though, because he was one of the first Europeans, aside from the Norse, which is another story, who made contact with the First Nations people and made one of the first attempts at a European colony. And, of course, as we know today in Canada, there's still French people here, so France's interests in Canada didn't just end there. It all kind of began with Cartier and those initial expeditions. So, I hope that answers some of your questions around Jacques Cartier. I'm going to post a lot of information on the website because it's a really interesting time in Canadian history, this whole exploration, European arrival, etc. But I encourage you to read a lot about it and think really critically about the types of relationships that were beginning to form. You had people coming from very far away with very different customs and ideas about how the world worked, coming into a land that was already occupied by people, and how those relationships would start affecting how the country of Canada would come to be.